So here we bring you in 2017 a completely different focus area, sport, and of course a cultural ambassador, a sport legend, and of course someone who's created, helped create great ambitions in young sportsmen. So I will leave Vivek to deal with the introductions and the event. I'll quickly talk about Vivek Reddy, and I'm sure most of us here know Vivek, but a quick introduction about Vivek. Vivek's career in financial services encompassed 10 years in a leadership role as a CEO of Kothari Pioneer Mutual Fund, which was the first mutual fund in the private sector. Kothari remained a fund based out of Chennai, denting the Bombay's claim that every major financial institution has to be in Bombay. Post the sale of the fund to Franklin Templeton, Vivek remained an active investor with a diverse portfolio of land and financial assets. Prior to his mutual fund stint, he was in LA as a consultant, and today, on the personal side, he attributes two things to his success. First one is Chennai, as a place as it is, it's given him a great deal of satisfaction because the city, in his own words, is a city's beautiful light, steady breeze, green cover, and most of all, our relaxed, fuss-free, laid-back charm suits him well. So he enjoys being in Chennai. And secondly, he's chosen not to be out of the rat race and enjoy life as such. So Vivek is as such a great example for the book, The Monk Who Sold Ferrari. So he didn't sell a Ferrari, but he sold a mutual fund company. And those friends who know him well don't really agree that he's a monk as well. So over to Vivek. Vivek, we look forward to enjoying the evening.
Thanks, Rajiv. What can you say about a sportsman who's got such athletic ability and skill that he got international recognition for his various exploits in the field, taking India to the Davis Cup final twice in 1974 and 1987. I think conquering the then about half a dozen world number ones in his chosen sport. The names of Lever, Becker, McEnroe, Connors, Borg, these are all household names to all of us. But there's one man who defeated all of them. And we're talking about sportsmen of that caliber. He also achieved perhaps won more ATP singles and doubles titles than any other Asian so far. And a whole host of 45 straight appearances in Wimbledon, quarterfinals, US Open, just victories all over the world. Just too numerous to enumerate. So in short, a very exclusive, belonging to a very exclusive club of international sportsmen who achieved such recognition at a very, very small club. Okay? Now, you take that and add to that someone who after their sporting career, the playing days, just by the strength of their wit and wisdom and their intelligence, made such a name for themselves world over with their organizational ability and their whole ability to be a statesman and foster international goodwill. For example, being chosen as the UN Messenger of Peace. Probably, 24 awards, which, when Hong Kong, today I was told that when the British handed over Hong Kong to China in 1997, they chose one person to be the master of ceremonies. Okay, so being chosen by the French government as a messenger of peace, the president of the ATP for the first 4 formative years and developing that institution to the status that it is today. So tremendous recognition as a statesman and really being sought after the world over, not just for his tennis capability, but also just his intelligence and his ability and his enlightened perspectives on a whole host of things. So when you take that group of exclusive sports people and people who have like taken that platform and then become so relevant internationally, you combine that, you're looking at a very, very small group of people. Okay. Now you throw one more thing into that mix. Someone who has such a very refreshing attitude in the sense of their values towards family. I mean, he loves his parents dearly. I think he's got a daily interaction with his two sons. Very well known the world over as a family man. Very spiritual and religious. Met with the Pope. Being conferred a honor. I think by the Pope. Very loyal to the country. I think he retains an Indian passport, even though I guess he's been tempted by so many other countries, and a basic belief in the goodness of people. So I think you take those two things, and then you combine that with somebody who's got such a refreshing, positive attitude in a sometimes cynical world. Someone who's seen the world, who's achieved so much, met so many people, and still got a very positive approach. I think you're really coming down to someone who's maybe in a handful of people. Now what I want to do is, I want to chuck all that aside and say that, let's say you meet someone, but you're looking for that one unique soul, okay, who even if you spent 1 million moments with them, and I think I've had the privilege of spending a lot of time, that each moment is so positive, stimulating intellectually, stretches you, it's fun, it's humorous, it's so light on the soul, but stretches you intellectually, easy on the heart. You really feel so excited just to be with them. Such a positive person who always is, I've never, in 1 million moments, you've never ever seen them down. I think if you have to identify such a person, I think there'll probably be just one unique soul. And, oh, there he is. Hey, Vijay. Oh, you're here.
I wish my wife was here. Vivek, thank you very much for that. Honestly thought you were talking about somebody else. But first, my thanks to Rajiv and Venu and Anand and everyone at CIC who have graciously invited me to be here and spend a few minutes with all of you and share some stories and share some thoughts, maybe interact with some ideas. And I'm delighted to catch up with Mr. Lakshminarayanan again. Thank you, sir, for having been on my TV show. We had a wonderful interaction and it went off really well. And they thought I knew more about your business than I really knew. I've lived overseas for a little over 40 years, but everything started right here, not far from Koturpuram, where we are today. And as most of you would know, I grew up very much here. I went to school here at Presentation Convent Church Park. I went to Don Bosco. I went to Loyola College. But my early years were not very, I wasn't very healthy growing up. I spent a lot of time in hospital, and I was ill as a child growing up. And often my mother would go to school and take notes and come and teach me in the hospital, and then beg the teachers to allow me to do the exam, which I rarely passed. And so I always say, once I left school, that we were very fortunate because for one set of fees, both of us were educated. The effort that they put in to my early years is really what has sort of stood me in good stead all the way through my life. I always say it's 98% their effort, especially my mother's, who actually gave me an opportunity to turn myself into something, because she literally took a raw piece of clay and then were able to mold something out of it and try to make me a normal human being. What came later was literally the icing on the cake. But the work ethic that she had and what they had at the time of my growing up is something that is so embedded in my brain that it always has put pressure on me to end up being a good parent. And you can never ask me that. You have to ask my children that. But what it did to me was it gave me an opportunity to be educated by seeing the world in a completely different perspective. At the time when we were growing up and we decided to play sport because of health, in my case anyway, in my brother's case, my older brother, who was absolutely brilliant, for some reason, I always tell my parents that God gave me to them so they could have a challenge, because the first son wasn't a challenge. He came first in class. If he came second, the house was a morgue. If I passed, my mother handed out sweets to everyone. Interestingly, we ended up playing doubles together, and it was exactly that. We were chalk and cheese. We still are. And we get along like a house on fire. I think the important aspect of that was when we started traveling overseas and the kind of the world that we were in at the time. Obviously, so many of you have seen our world, seen Chennai when it was Madras in early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and of course the world as it was in the 70s. We went through so many different US elections as we see today, and we can come to that in a minute. But I do believe that that early travel in the early 70s, when we went not just to the UK and Europe in the late 60s and then to America in the early 70s, that it gave us an opportunity to really study the rest of the world. At that time, India was a faraway place. It was a mythological place where we still obviously didn't have telephones and traveled on elephants and the usual thing that Americans thought about Indians. And in turn, what Indians thought about the US was that if you went out after 8 p.m. at night, you'd be shot. Not very different today, perhaps. But I do believe that that early years of travel gave us an education that was unimaginable. And we realized as we traveled that we were unique in the industry that we were in. We were playing tennis and being paid for something that we were going to do anyway. My parents were constantly asked, yes, they play tennis, but what do they do for a living? And obviously, none of us could answer it till I won my first tournament. And they couldn't believe then the prize money check that I received. But the second question was all the more important, which my late grandmother used to always say to us, why do you have to go so far to lose? Still couldn't answer that one. But when we traveled abroad and we saw we were so fascinated by the work ethic, by the facilities, by what was available, how do we compete with the rest of the West and the best of every sport that we were seeing? We were also unique in the fact that there were very few people of our color and ethnicity playing in a sport that was literally a white sport the world over. The only other person of color in our sport at the time was the great Arthur Ashe, who, when he won Wimbledon in '75, the journalist came up to me and said, are you disappointed that you'll only be the second colored man to win Wimbledon? And I think these kinds of things gave us food for thought as we constantly traveled the world. I was very fortunate also to have met people during the course of my travels, which meant a lot to me. And I also understood that wherever I played in the world, that people who knew tennis might know me, but more importantly, when they took one look at me, they would look at me and say, well, he's Indian. And to me, that was a critical element of the kind of what Indians went through living overseas. And I think that was a very integral part of my being even more Indian than I truly was. And I continue to be that way. I think the important thing here is the fact that I would run into so many Indians, whether it's in the engineering profession or in the medical profession or in the law profession, business profession, and so on and so forth, who would come to me in stores, in a variety of places, and say to me, well, when you came to Cincinnati, you did this for my boss, and which is why he ended up talking to me in the late 70s. And similarly in a hospital, and I would have talked to a chief of surgery who had a box seat at this event, and the only reason this chief of surgery would talk to the Indian resident was because I had taken pictures with his children during the course of the tournament. So there were a lot of these things that had a great impact on the Indian community in the West. And then, as it turned out, I won a major tournament in New Hampshire, which, along with the prize money, ended up being a car. The first Asian to win a car in a tournament. And this was in 73. And you can well imagine India in 73, and you win a car. And so 2 days later, we put it on a boat and sent it to Madras. The Indian ambassador called me up and congratulated me and said, well done, we're so proud of you, and so on and so forth. What did you do with the car? So I said, sir, I put it on a boat and sent it to India. So, well, you can't do that. We're not allowed to import cars into the country. You know that. I said, no, I don't know that. I'm 18 years old. Anyway, the boat took 4 months or something to reach India at the time. And needless to say, it was in the press morning, noon, and night about this car that got more publicity than I did. Anyway, to cut to the chase, it went all the way up to the then Prime Minister, who, smart as she was, she decided that I would have to pay the duty of 52,000 rupees on this vehicle at the time, which the duty was charged by the Finance Ministry, and then the Education Ministry gave me a grant for 52,000 rupees. That's how smart she was, at the time. Needless to say, when the car came into Chennai and it was on all the front pages, gave it to my dad, and Dad, of course, drove it the rest of the time at 5 miles an hour up and down Mount Road constantly. It was an enjoyable moment to know what it meant to be able to share it with family. And even my sons always ask me today, Dad, why did you pick the 4-door sedan? Why didn't you pick the 2-door open top? Because you know how many girls you could have got with that 2-door top. And I said, yes, I hope if and when you do pick up your first car, that it is a sedan, so we can ride in it. I think the growth from there, as far as my tennis career was concerned, took me. Well, I was very fortunate to have played for 21 years on the tour, 20 years of Davis Cup, and of course, as Vivek mentioned, we reached the finals twice. There were a lot of political aspects also to us in the Davis Cup competition at the time. In '74, the government then decided that we wouldn't play the final against South Africa because of apartheid at the time. At that particular time, we were disappointed. I was 20 years of age. And I thought this was a great golden opportunity for India to win the Davis Cup and put our name forever on the cup itself that Dwight Davis started in the 1800s. And but that wasn't to be. And I realized thereafter the importance of what it meant, where there were 5 million whites running a country that had 15 million coloreds, and what it meant to them to be able to live normally like all of us, that we took for granted. In 1988, I was fortunate to then speak at the UN General Assembly against apartheid in South Africa, and 89, I ended up becoming president of the ATP, and the 2 tournaments that the ATP Tour had in Cape Town and Johannesburg were the only 2 sporting events left in South Africa at the time. All other sports had gone out of South Africa as a sports boycott. And they wanted to retain the tournaments. The government wanted to retain the tournaments in Joburg and Cape Town. And we were asked, a lot of pressure on us to take the tournaments out. And so I invited both groups to come to New York to make a presentation to us just opposite the UN. And Arthur Ashe led the delegation to take the tournaments out. and the Deputy Vice Minister from the South African government, de Klerk's government, sent a group to want us to keep the tournaments in South Africa. So each of them were given an hour, they did their presentations, and eventually we were able to come up, as I told the council, that we were able to come up with a solution that was going to be able to satisfy both groups. So what we ended up doing was freezing the weeks of those two tournaments because it was hard to get on the calendar, but then still taking out Cape Town and Joburg for that particular year and for the years till Mandela was going to be released, which is what happened. And then we, of course, once segregation was lifted and they had the one man, one vote, we gave the tournaments back in those specific weeks for Cape Town and Joburg. So we were able to not affect the sporting world in South Africa, but we were able to affect the policy there. To a great extent, 13 years later, we ended up having to face a fairly similar situation when we beat Russia in the first qualifying match, the Soviet Union then, of course, in Delhi. And the first round against Argentina was a real dogfight. I can come to that later. But then in the quarterfinals, we were due to play Israel, and we didn't have full diplomatic ties with Israel either. So I was in Palm Springs when the Indian Parliament decided we were going to default the match to Israel because we didn't have full diplomatic ties to Israel. So I flew back and was very fortunate to have met with our then Prime Minister at the time and explained to him over 60 minutes how important it was to play this match. And he said, but we don't have any ties with Israel. No team has come here. No team of ours has gone there. We don't have any this. We don't have any that. And he said, we just can't do it. We have a very close ties with the Arab world. The strongest supporter, obviously, at the time of Mr. Arafat, the late Mr. Arafat. And so I said, well, the policies can remain the same, but we have a good chance to play a winning match here. That's the most important thing for us. And so I tried to insist upon him. Anyway, I think I broke him down. It took me about 60 minutes to do it. He was kind enough to give me the 60 minutes. And I knew I had him when I got up and he said, what chances do we have of winning? So I said, not good, sir, but they're a better team than we are, but I think we should give it a shot if we're going to be in Delhi, a home match in Delhi. Anyway, what happened was our wonderful Mr. Chidambaram was at that time Minister of Home, and so he was in charge of security, and he was so kind. I went to him and he gave me all of the security needed for the teams and so on and so forth, and then no hotel would put up the Israeli team coming into India to play for the first time. Eventually, we got the Hyatt in Delhi to give us 2 floors. They came in with 40 Mossad agents, and it was all one big merry mess. I thought I'd gotten myself into a real thing, and then of course I was on the hit list and so on and so forth, and we eventually had guards around me 24/7, and then we had to take a different route to the tennis match every day to practice. 2 miles radius of the stadium, they closed down the roads, and it was all a very confusing situation. Anyway, to cut to the chase, we ended up beating them 4-love, and got a frantic call from the Prime Minister's office saying, thank God and congratulations. And I went back and I saw him because the Israeli captain said to me, I don't think we'll ever come back to India again. Could we please go see the Taj Mahal? So I said, no, if I were you, I'd leave here very quickly, and just go back home. And he said, well, we won't come back here. So I did go back to the Prime Minister again, and he was kind enough to say he thought at this point I'm completely mad, so it didn't really matter. But we did send them in a big convoy to go see the Taj Mahal. And they went away with incident-free. And a week later, we were applauded at the UN for what we had done unanimously. And I think 5 years later, to the month, Shimon Peres visited India, and we had full diplomatic ties with Israel. So we like to believe and like to think that we played a small role in being able to open up that door to be able to get them through. It gave me an opportunity many years later, after my career was over, that I was able to be president of the tour for 5 terms at the ATP, and then give me an opportunity to do television from September 91 for Star Sports in Asia. But it also gave me many years later an opportunity to serve the UN as Kofi Annan, the Secretary General, appointed me a messenger of peace, alongside the great Muhammad Ali, Luciano Pavarotti, Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate, and Michael Douglas, the actor. We were the first ones appointed messengers of peace, and to travel to places in the world that we don't normally hear of, from Bosnia to northern Sri Lanka to Aceh after the tsunami and to Bhuj after the earthquake and so on and so forth, and gave me an opportunity to see how the UN works globally. And the Security Council that they have is really the smallest part of what the UN does. I think the 60 agencies that the UN has, with a variety of global ambassadors from Angelina Jolie to Susan Sarandon, I think is an important factor as to what exactly the UN does. And it really opened my eyes to see what immense goodwill you can do by just being able to share with others in different parts of the world. It gave me an opportunity after that to be able to also start, once my term with the UN finished, to be able to start my own little foundation in the US and be able to support and make a difference to many of the causes here in India as well. On a variety of, I like doing different things, ended up being in the acting business for some time, so I ended up doing a couple of films, which was very enjoyable. I think the first film I did, the James Bond picture, was simply because I was picked off the center court at Wimbledon to go do a screen test. And I figured nobody, not even Federer or Borg or Smith or Ashe or Laver or Newcomb or anyone else or Djokovic or Murray, any one of these guys, could say they worked at Pinewood in the morning and played at Wimbledon in the evening. So I had all these crazy thoughts in my head at the time. You know, I figured I was coming from Chennai and coming from Madras. I needed to do everything in one lifetime as much as I could. And it gave me an opportunity to do more. I ended up doing a Star Trek film, Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. I became the first Indian to do television series on American television on NBC. I was the only Indian on the Johnny Carson show. I was on Good Morning America. I did a whole variety of talk shows. And I enjoyed all of it because I think for me, I always looked at all of it as a great, great education that all came from my tennis, that all came from the fact that I grew up in a city that gave me the sense of family, it gave me a sense of community, it gave me a sense of bringing people together, and good always triumphs over evil, as my son always says. And so we always had a chance to share all of this with others, both adults and youngsters. And today for me, my greatest education comes from my sons and their friends who are able to teach me more than I could ever teach them. And I think as we look at the way India was and the way Chennai was in the late 60s and early 70s and what it gave us, it is something that we need to constantly remind ourselves of and perhaps even remind the children of, that this is something that we can't let loose out of. We can't lose these ingrained stuff that makes us who we are, but also move with the times and to be able to help ourselves and help the next generation keep that basic stuff in mind before we actually move forward. And I think people who come, all of my friends from overseas who have come and visited my hometown here in Chennai have always said to me that the rich tradition that we have and the cultural aspects of this city and the entire vision that people have when they leave here is so ingrained in their minds that wherever they go back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, Biloxi, Mississippi, Boise, Idaho, they go back to different parts of the West, they cannot get this impression out of their minds. And I think it's so important for us to be able to constantly share what Chennai has to offer to the rest of the world, because we are so rich in what we have. We're so rich in it, and it's not just, it's never the cash equivalent of it, but it's more the question of the culture that we have so traditionally ingrained in our being that we're able to share with the rest of the West. And this is what they're looking for. And I think to a great extent, we haven't done perhaps enough of sharing what we have in Chennai with the rest of the world. And sometimes when I look at Chennai from overseas, and I say, what stands out for us here in the city? What landmark would you put out and say, this is my hometown? Is it Marina Beach? Is it Fort St. George? What is it? Where do we actually fit in? You take one look at the Statue of Liberty, you know it's New York. You take one look at the Big Ben, you know it's the UK. You take one look at Sydney Opera House, you know it's Sydney. You take one look at the Arc de Triomphe, you know it's Paris. You look at the pyramids, you know it's Egypt. There are historic perspectives and man-made stuff that we can actually showcase what Chennai has to offer, to bring the people here and to be able to share our vision and share our culture. I think there's so many things that we can talk about, but the most important thing here is to be able to inspire the rest of the world with what we have. The television show that I've done for CNN and our dear Mr. Lakshminarayanan was kind enough to be on, I had some of my foreign guests on the show as well. And interestingly, one of the guests on my foreign show was on January 20th becomes President of the United States. So Donald Trump was a guest on my show. The only 1 hour, one-on-one interview he has ever done. And he was just as interesting and just as funny as he is on television today. But the interesting thing again is the fact that we were being educated by learning more about people all the way from Donald Trump, who was a guest on my show, to Wolfgang Puck, who was a food wizard in food, to Sharon Stone as an actor, and Mike Pierce Brosnan, to someone like Hugh Hefner, who started the entire Playboy empire. I said to him, Hugh, how did you get started? He said, my mother gave me $1,000 to start it. And she said, what are you going to do with it? And he said, well, I'm going to have a religious experience. And apparently he did. But there are people I got to talk to who are so special when you go to people's homes or offices and you're able to do interviews.
You're religious yourself.
Very much so. Interviews with them. I got a chance to, also a guest on my show was the second man on the moon, Buzz Aldrin. And I went to his home to interview him. And you look at all the accolades from NASA and space and so on and so forth, and from the president, and variety of accolades that he had received. But there was this one little plaque on the wall that really caught my attention. And Buzz and I became good friends, and we were talking about a variety of things. And there was a small plaque on the wall that really caught my attention. And to me, that said a lot, because when you're growing up and you're children and you're growing up, we constantly tell our kids, you do this and you do well in your school, and sky's the limit. You do this in school, get high marks, sky's the limit. Keep good health and do the right thing, sky's the limit. Everything sky's the limit, So that little plaque on the wall said, who said sky's the limit when I left my footprints on the moon? And there are lots of these things that inspire to think beyond what you can do. And I always look back at the time when I couldn't run 50 yards, and my mother would drive the car by the side of me, and eventually I ran 5 to 10 miles every morning because she drove the car by the side of me, and I would fall on the roadside and run again at 5 a.m. and think that always that the impossible is nothing, and to be able to share these kinds of thoughts with people who were able to tell us that, listen, we can go to the moon and we can reach for the stars and we can reach beyond the impossible, to share our views and to be able to share what we have with others. And I think these experiences that I've been blessed with would never have come if my mom, who had 2 near fatal accidents and came out of it in her 30s, to be able to turn me into something that I hope has been for the good. And so for me, it has been my greatest education by a long shot. I can talk about sports forever and a variety of things that we need to do, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is to have that kind of strength with family that can take you to heights that you never thought you would reach. So I'm very fortunate to have had the parents that I've had, and I'm delighted to be amongst all of you to share some thoughts and ideas, and I hope we can interact a bit to be able to share ideas back and forth. But most important of all, I feel that I came from this town, I came from this city, I came from this culture, and it has given me so much that I hope that all of us collectively will be able to share our good fortune with the rest of the world, because I don't think there's any other time in history that we need it more than today. Thanks very much. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, Vijay.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah.
Keep it clean.
Do we have to? Adult, mature audience. So, now you moved from an international sportsman to an international statesman, which not many people have achieved. There are very many international sports people, honors, whatever in your field, but not many stayed relevant and a celebrity of sorts and known equally well internationally post their career, which is what you did. So how did that evolve and when did that start forming in your head for you to become
No, I don't think it's intentional by any stretch of imagination. It's what you like to do. And I've been very fortunate. I always say I'm the world's busiest man being unemployed. Because it gives me an opportunity to go places I never thought I would go. It gives me a chance to be able to share my experiences with others, both young and old. And I think it also gives me a chance to be able to learn from them, which is my biggest takeaway when I speak at universities, whether it's at Wharton or Columbia, Northwestern, Eton and Harrow, the UK, and so on and so forth, where I've had the good fortune to speak. The Q&A with the youngsters is what really gives me the chance to be educated. But I think wherever you go, wherever we go anyway, whether there are 5 people or 5,000 people or 5 million people watching on television, the important thing is to be who you are and to be able to know that you're constantly representing a country that I was privileged to do for 20 years. And for me, that was a very important factor to be able to, when I set foot out of my room and I go in public, the important thing is they know you're an Indian. And so it would reflect on all Indians. Not that it was an effort on my part because I just did what I did, but I think the important thing is when people come to a tennis tournament and see a quarterfinal lineup, they see 8 people playing, 7 of them look one way, 1 of them looks the other way. So when they go away, they're going to think, oh well, all Indians behave like this, or all Indians are like this. And with behavior and the presence and the presentation on court and so on and so forth, with all due respect to my dear friend John McEnroe, that wasn't my first preference.
All right. So, Vijay, you achieved great success as a sports person. Now, what would you recommend for the city of Madras and for the country if we appointed you the sports director? What are the strategies you would employ to create more greatness in this field?
Well, you wouldn't want that because I don't take jobs. And I've never had a job. So I think that would be a bit of a stretch. But I think the fortunate part of us in Chennai especially has been the incredible family support and the discipline that we have. Whether it's in business, that there's been incredible successes like all of you. Everyone has had an incredible success in different walks of life. Whether you talk about all the way from my predecessor, Ramanathan Krishnan, to then to myself in tennis, and then of course Ramesh, my brother Anand, and so on and so forth, which has come from Chennai, of course. Then of course later on we've had the incredible Vishy Anand, who's done put us on the chess map of the world. You have an Oscar-winning musician like A.R. Rahman. You have incredible filmmakers like Mani Ratnam. You have so many artists that you probably say outside of the business community that all of you are in. I think it's something that we need to focus on. I think we really do need to focus on the fact India as a whole has so much to offer. The time it really bothers me with sport is when we come away from something like Rio with 2 medals. We have won less medals from the time India got its independence, less than 1 American athlete. That's kind of, if you're an athlete, that's hard to swallow. We need a system that will actually help us throw hundreds of exquisite athletes up against the world. I always say there are 3 reasons to play the sport. The first reason is for exercise. All of us need to do it. Kids, older people. My dad played singles tennis till he was 85. And the only reason he stopped playing singles tennis at 85 is because my mother stopped him from doing it. So he stopped. But the best tennis match I ever saw was when my dad was 80 playing a set against my second son who was 10. That's the best singles match I ever saw. Both competing very hard against one another, not giving the line calls, close line calls, and so on and so forth. But the thing that upset my dad most of all was the fact that my wife, rather his wife, my mother, was cheering for my son. That really bothered him, I think.
Who won that match?
But yes, exactly. Good point. They stopped at 5-all because we said the samosas were getting cold. But, I just think that the first reason to do it is exercise for health. Everyone should do it. The second reason we should do it is if we compete within ourselves. Mumbai compete with Bengaluru, Bengaluru compete with Chennai, Chennai compete with Delhi, Delhi competes with Kolkata, and so on. So those are two good reasons to do it. But when we get into the third reason, to be able to compete with the rest of the world, then the equation completely changes. The issues are completely different. The trainings are completely different. The food habits, the diet, what is required to do that is a sacrifice beyond our reasonable, see, we, especially in India on one hand, but on South Indians on another hand, and Tamilians on even further, is the safety net. We like a safety net. We have to go to school. We have to go to college. We have to get a good degree. We have to get a job. Then you have to get a place to stay. Then you get a car. Then you find your spouse. And once you find your spouse, your parents still tell you, when is your kid coming? And then when you have a kid, when's the second kid coming? It's a normal train of events. The guy's not going to say, go play a sport because you might win something. After 10 years of doing something and you become a very good player, you still can't win. When my son said to me, when Prakash said to me, I want to play tennis, can you make me a champion? No, I said, I can make you into a good player, but I can't make you win. The win has to come from between the ears. It has to come from between the ears. And the unfortunate part about sport is you can play it as long as you want. There are no guarantees. If you go to school, if you go to college, it could take me longer, it could take him shorter, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, you're likely to come out with a degree. But in sport, that risk factor is so high. And we, in India, are a very, especially in the South, we are a very safe, if you see a river and you have an American with you, you let him go first, see what happens. And then once he falls in, you say, I told you. So we also have been a very accepting group of people. You go sit at a coffee shop and you order, excuse me, what do you have for breakfast? I'll have an omelette and some toast. And the American says, well, I'll have fried eggs and bacon. Both go the way, and some omelette and toast. The guy brings me eggs Benedict and he brings this guy a ham omelette. I said, oh, well, I ordered an omelette and toast. I said, oh, sorry, sir, I'll go and change. No, I said, no, don't worry, it'll be okay. I'll have this. It's absolutely fine. It's eggs Benedict, absolutely fine. The other guy said, I ordered eggs and sausage. What the hell happened? So listen, guess what? I'm not paying the bill. Now, I'm not saying that's the right attitude or the wrong attitude. It's just a different attitude. We are also fairly acceptable. We are very safe. And I'm not quite sure a high-risk event is for us at that point in time. But then again, if you go to Atlantic City or you go to Vegas or you go to Macau, the two sets of people you see there are Indians and Chinese. They're gambling left, right, and 60. That's a high-risk factor. So I think we have to decide how we want to approach it, because the one thing I do not want to see by the time Tokyo comes around in 2020 and wherever the event is in 2024, that we're still sitting here asking the same questions.
So you're saying we're either a zero risk audience or a 100% risk audience, and sports requires 50% risk. So we either gamble or we stay at our homes, but we don't take that measured risk.
Yeah,
right?
I think we should. I think it's important for us, no risk, no reward. Everyone knows in business that there is an element of risk. The ROI is the most important factor. There's the stock price move up. A variety of issues that you attach and attract to put a great team together, as we would with a tennis player or a chess player or a badminton player. Put a good team together and make sure that each person of the team carries his weight. And at the end of the day, the person who benefits is not just yourself personally and professionally, but the country benefits at the end of the day.
But what would you recommend that the leading lights of the city do to promote sport in their city?
Well, I think there's lots of things that we can do, not just in the city, but in the country. But as far as we're concerned, the important thing here is that when we look at an incredible group like this that have come together, 6, 7 months now, as Rajiv was mentioning, and I think you have an incredible platform to be able to add such great value to this wonderful city that we all grew up in. From a standpoint of putting Chennai on the world map. Chennai on the world map is something that we should constantly look at, because people, many years ago, there was a group from Colgate University in upstate New York that came to India for the first time to learn South Indian music and dancing. And it was such a, I flew with them, I happened to be on the Air India flight from New York to Chennai. And there were 40 young American girls from Colgate University who were coming to learn South Indian music and dancing. So, needless to say, it was in the 70s, and it was, you know, for whatever reason, I got chatting with them.
You being the shy type, of course.
Yeah, very important. And have you all traveled anywhere? Was my first question to them, and they said, no, we haven't traveled outside of upstate New York. They're going all the way to Madras. I said, what are you expecting? Oh, we are expecting the worst. We're expecting the worst. We're taking a lot of medicines with us. We're going to get bad stomachs. We are going to stay in a terrible place. And this was in the 70s. So anyway, I said, here's my number. We were living in Nungambakam, close to Loyola College. Gave a number. If you have problems, give us a call. So they came in, the pictures were taken in front of the Air India plane, they had garlands around their thing. They were so warmly welcomed when they landed in Madras. 24 hours later, we get a call at home, and pick up the phone, and the girls are crying on the phone. They want to go back. They want to go back. 24 hours later, they can't handle it. Okay, where are you staying? We're staying at the Woodlands, next to Savera, right? Oh, it's a vegetarian place. I mean, these young American girls are coming here, they're staying in Woodlands. Great. So I said, okay, well, my mom and I are coming over to your place. So I took, my mother was very involved in these kinds of things, because she always felt that when we went to America for the first time, that we were welcomed so warmly that when people come from overseas, that we need to look after them. So we went there, and these girls were all sitting in one room crying. There was no air conditioning, there was no television, there was no, you know, they had one fan. And so they were sitting under the fan, and there was obviously vegetarian food that they had not seen much of, and so on. So then my mother went to town. She made an arrangement with the Savera next door to serve them what they wanted, got them 50% off or whatever it was, got them to some stores, had made deals with 4 auto rickshaws to take them all over town. I said, this is amazing. So 2-3 days later, I went off on my tour again to play. Then I came back about 8 weeks later, 9 weeks later, and my mother had an office downstairs. And I would see, you know, 3 girls come in and 2 girls go out, and 4 girls come in and 3 girls go out. Auto rickshaws are flying in and out of my house, left and right. Everybody in the town was talking about these girls from the US. And interestingly, they got so immersed in the culture of the city that 3 months later, when they did their wonderful performance at the Music Academy, and Mom and Dad were there, and I happened to be there as well, that they literally cried to leave the city. They just did not want to get on that plane to go back home. And these were young girls who had never traveled outside upstate New York. And interestingly, all 40 of them have consistently visited Chennai, both after their education is over, after they got married, they brought their husbands back. And I thought that was a real great influence that we had on their lives from a cultural standpoint, to be able to give them something that they never dreamt would, you know, and it opened up their lives completely.
One of them is still today in the city.
Oh, really?
He keeps coming every other month. She took a copy from here, and she's still having it.
Wow. So you remember it clearly, right? It's fantastic.
I can buy it,
Yeah.
I can understand.
Isn't that a great story? I think that's one of our best stories in Chennai. Yes, yeah.
Vijay, putting Chennai on the map, I think that's a common aspiration for everybody in this room. and you touched upon sport and you touched upon culture. Now, if we have to pick up ideas and strategies from overseas, for example, where you live in Los Angeles, they've been able to, most cities in the world, and you mentioned a few, the Arc de Triomphe and Statue of Liberty, they've been able to create some symbols and institutions of great significance. For example, Los Angeles has the Getty Center, you have the Disney Concert Hall, you have some great universities. UCLA, I think, has produced some great students.
There's another one too called USC, just to make sure.
Anyway, so
my son went to USC, he went to UCLA.
So some great institutions have been produced. Now, how have they been able to achieve that? And if you look at Madras in India has been fairly thin. We could do a lot more.
Yes, I think so. I think, as I said earlier, when we look at Chennai, how do we say this is the city of Chennai? What do we show them that stands out? And I think a lot of it, at least all of it, is done internationally only by the private sector. Very rarely the government gets involved. And I think it's something that, whether it's the Arm & Hammer Museum in West LA, or the Getty Center, as you pointed out, also on Sunset, Disney Concert Hall. But there are a variety of corporates that get very heavily involved in putting a landmark architectural behemoth that we end up putting in town. And it takes years to do it. We're all aware of it. But it's something that can give us what our city and our state is all about. And I think that's something that we can all sort of work towards to see if we can get there eventually. To put some landmark that when you look at it, you'll say, oh yes, that's the Sydney Opera House at Sydney. This is what Chennai is all about.
Can you just talk a little bit more about your romance with Hollywood and the real reasons why you got into acting? And you can share it with us.
Well, I did the first picture, the Bond picture. They killed me in that one. Then I did a second picture, Star Trek. They killed me in that one. And I did a third one also, a ninja film. They killed me in that one. So I said, listen, I'm going to have to find a script I don't have to die in, okay? I don't care what it is you want me to do. Just give me something I don't have to die in. And I'm still looking. Apparently I die really well. Nominated for an Emmy. But yeah, we always say Hollywood. I've lived in Los Angeles now in the same house for 30 years. And proud to say we built the house, but I didn't do it. My wife drew the house that she wanted on a napkin. And we built that exact same house from the napkin onto what she wanted. And I get to rent 2 rooms in the house, so I'm very comfortable. But the interesting thing was, on the next street to us, before he died, Michael Jackson lived on the next street to us, and Janet Jackson is a neighbor, and David Hasselhoff, and Ray Romano from the TV series, and Michael Milken, who you all might know obviously from business, and so on and so forth, up the road. So we have a lot of people of that nature living within our neighborhood, and it's a fairly quiet neighborhood. But the interesting thing about Hollywood, we always say, is Hollywood is not a place, it's a state of mind. And Los Angeles is not a very positive place for visitors. You come to LA only if you know people. Otherwise, you're better off going to San Francisco. And I shouldn't be saying that because I was given the key to the city of Los Angeles by the mayor, then Mayor Tom Bradley. I became the first ever Indian to receive the key to the city of Los Angeles. Our dear late Prime Minister, Mrs. Gandhi, was the second Indian to receive the key to the Los Angeles. So I talk very highly of LA because it's a friendly city, but for visitors, it's a lot more difficult to get around because the transit system is poor, the metro system is, we don't have a metro system, the bus service is not very good. Obviously Uber has come in and saved all of our lives over there. And Travis, the guy who started Uber, lives up north of us, and he's constantly down in LA as well, trying to get more Uber drivers. So I think that has made a big difference to the way LA operates, so it's easier to come. But it's truly, in my opinion, a great place to visit, because even after you've seen Universal Studios and you've seen Disneyland, there are a lot of other things to be able to do in Los Angeles which you perhaps cannot do other places. Not to mention go to the local Starbucks and see anyone from Schwarzenegger to Sam Jackson come out with a bad cup of coffee.
You want to see Sofia, do you know where she lives and can you take us there? Sofia Vergara?
Sofia Vergara?
Yeah.
I don't know how many of you know Sofia Vergara. Anybody know Sofia Vergara? All the young people put their hand up. Okay. She's in a show called Modern Family. It's a TV show. And it's, yeah, actually the less said the better about Sofia Vergara.
Okay, so the concluding question, Vijay, from my side before we throw it up to the audience. Tomorrow, I think, is a very significant day for you. It happens to be, I think, the birthday of someone who is very dear to you, your mother, Mrs. Maggie Amritraj. So can you just close on what she means to you and how?
Well, you know, obviously it's not public, but my mom turns 90 tomorrow. And we're very grateful that we have her with us. We nearly lost her in June, and the doctors did everything they could, and they said we had lost her. But then she's always been that incredible fighter. You know, she in her 30s she was burnt completely and came out of it. 4 years later, she started a small industry to pay for my tennis, and lost her right hand in the machines. And they told her that she would not be able to eat, she would not be able to drive, and she would not be able to write. And so she did all three so I could play tennis. So she's fought through and inspired me more than anyone else. And I've honestly met some incredibly inspiring people to inspire to do things that it's truly impossible. Everyone from having had lunch with the Nelson Mandela to Pope John Paul to obviously our Saint Mother Teresa and so on and so forth. And it's been a incredible experience. But no one on a daily basis inspires me more than my mom does. And we are so delighted that we are able to celebrate her 90th birthday tomorrow. Yeah, sure. Any question? Yeah. Yes, I can. Yeah.
Today's world in the US, you see a lot of Indians who are senators and who are governors and going up the ladder. You, with your type of background, with being very popular, how come you've never entered politics in the US?
I think I have to say it's not something that I have not thought of in the past, and I probably thought of it more about probably 15 years ago, 16 years ago, especially when my dear friend Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister at the time. And it's something that we did discuss briefly. But I think the important factor is that you want to be able to go in and make a difference. And to honestly make a difference. Not just for your constituency that you would be representing at the capital, but more importantly, the ability to be able to make a difference in what your philosophy is, if you actually got elected for that purpose. The parliamentary system of democracy is a system that I'm not quite, I don't know, because obviously I haven't been right in the heart of it, but it needs to be conducive for an individual to be able to actually help make a difference, not just to your constituents, but also to the philosophy at large, not just for the party, but for the country. And so I think the aspect of, we've always had this debate the world over between a presidential form of government and a parliamentary form of government. And obviously they both have their advantages and disadvantages. But sometimes, you know, it's like looking at the grass on the other side and saying it's greener, you know. And I do believe that the fact that we as a country are able to live in unity with our diversity that we have I mean, it's like running all of Europe under one head. It's just an incredible effort that we're able to pull together. And the elections that we have that spread over 6-8 weeks is just so spectacular with hardly any incident is something that we should be proud about the democracy that we're in. But at the same time, I think it is absolutely vital for all of our people in politics, whoever they might be, and whatever office they're in, especially in elected office, that we're able to make a difference, not just for a constituency, but as a whole. So, yes, perhaps I'm too old now to do it, but I did think about it at one time. Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Going back to sport.
Yeah.
Going back to sport, I would believe BAT, Britannia Amritraj Academy, probably created the best of breed players who we have seen for India playing tennis, and even as of until now. Why is it that it didn't work, or why is it that we're not able to create another BAT at the moment?
So, so those of you who are not aware of what it was, at the time that I was finishing up my tennis career, I felt that every time I played well, I didn't worry about the future. Every time I played badly, I worried about the future. And so there was a friend of mine who ran a company, obviously in this country, Britannia at the time, and said to me, listen, why don't you pick the boys and let us pay for it, and we'll create a program of excellence. And so we started this program called the Britannia Amritraj Tennis Program, and we decided to have 8 kids to start with in year 1. And I said the only way we'll be able to do it is if there were some caveats. That they would live with us, that they would eat with us, that they would train with us, and the families wouldn't be able to see them except on a Sunday afternoon. And the most important aspect of all was if my mother decided I could get her to run the program. Because if she looked after 3 of us, she could look after 8 of them. And so we started the program, and we got 8 kids in. She tasted every one of their meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner to see what they ate. She made sure that their homework was done every day. She made sure that each of these 8 children had the ability to practice their own religion. And she had the ability to talk to the doctors to be able to treat each one of them completely different every time they had a physical ailment. We don't have any of that. We don't have any of that today. The reason we ended it after 17 years was simply because mom got too old to be able to run it. We had 1 Wimbledon junior champion, we had 3 Asian junior champions, we had several members of the Indian Davis Cup team, and of course, one of the biggest and probably, arguably, the only positive, unanimous opinion of the company Britannia at the annual general meeting in Calcutta every year was the Britannia Amritraj Tennis Program. It's the best thing that you all could have ever done. And we had the only one sponsor for the entire 17, 18 years. And even when we ended the program, they wanted to continue for another 3 years. And we are the ones who said we couldn't do it because mom wasn't able to do it. So I think the important thing is we have to decide how we want to go. If there's a school of excellence, it needs to be a school of excellence, and how we need to address it in that particular manner. Because our sport is such an individual sport, and if you can commit yourself behind it, and you have a really good team behind it, I have no doubts in my mind that we have the ability to be able to be back in the world group. We need to be back in the world group in Davis Cup, and we need to be back in Fed Cup world group. That is something we need to achieve to be able to call ourselves a tennis-playing nation. And to this day, this year is the 30th anniversary of our last visit to the Davis Cup final. We reached the final in 1987. And to this day, in the last 30 years, we haven't had a consistent performer in the top 100. It's important to have players in the top 50 pushing each other, at which point in time we have a chance to actually make the Davis Cup World Group and the Fed Cup.
Vijay, if you take Chennai as a city or Tamil Nadu as a state, it has produced some individual superstars over a period of time, whether it's tennis, cricket, and all that. If you take cricket, we won the Ranji Trophy only twice in so many years. Today, Gujarat has won it for the first time.
Incredible.
So, we have superstars, but is it a problem of teaming, or why is it that Chennai and Tamil Nadu are not able to team in any sport properly to win major events?
Well, I think we have a good team concept here because the business community thrives a lot. And in business, it's very difficult to pinpoint and say one person made a huge difference. In a business concept, obviously, we all know that as a team, it helps the company grow to what it needs to grow. And similarly, in sport today, I don't think, even though we all played an individual sport, today you do need a very strong team behind you. You know, if a youngster like Prajnesh is going to be able to make it in the world of sport, it's important for him to have the kind of support, important for him to have the kind of team around him, whether it's diet, whether it's training, whether it's the methods, whether it's the changes that he needs, maybe the right coach. The coach doesn't exist after a year, he should change his coach. There's so many things that he would have to do to be able to hit the world of tennis running. And similarly in other sports as well. For me, I find it difficult to handle a sport when there are committees involved. Sport, the greatest thing about sport is its purity and it's based on merit. There's no discretion. As soon as you use discretion in sport, then merit is out the window. The greatest thing about our sport is it's governed entirely by the world ranking that comes out every Monday morning from Florida. That ranking is spit out every Monday morning from Florida. And that's all that governs. Today, when you look at the seeding at the Australian Open, the great Roger Federer is seeded 17. Oh, I won 17 Grand Slams. Sorry, the computer from Florida said you should be seeded 17. So we have to follow that path and look at it and say, what kind of a team can we put together to make this person the best that he can possibly be?
Vijay, I think you need to hear this story. We have struggled for Prajnesh, I can say at least more than 17 years in this city. He didn't go to school after his 7th standard. His grandfather put the thought of tennis into his mind, and his grandparents took him every day, like your parents, to the tennis court. And after he was 11, we couldn't find a place where he could really kind of focus on tennis. He struggled. He went to different places. In fact, when he was 12, he's our only son, and we had to send him to Pune, only child. He went to Pune for a year. And then Sundarraju in Bangalore, I spoke to him. He came over here, and then I told him what can be done, whether we should send him to Nick Bollettieri or somewhere, where should we send him? He thought about it, and once Sundar told me in Bangalore that Prajnesh was the real reason why I set up an academy in Bangalore. If you know, Sundar set up a tennis academy in Bangalore, and he was one of those early kids who went there, and he brought a Brit tennis player, Jonathan. He was with him for 3 years. Exactly as you said. He stayed there, lived there, played there, and even the studies they had organized in the morning, the evening. And to cut the long story short, after that he went to Spain and he went to other places. He had been struggling in the last few years. He had some injuries, but still now, luckily this year he has done well and he has come up. But all that I'm trying to say is, in a city, the city which has produced people like you, after you, we really have not had any facility which could be either run by one individual or jointly by a group. And in fact, I remember Vivek took me to Ramesh. I think he was about 15 or 16. That was about 12 years ago. And Ramesh gave some advice. We were again wondering whether he should go. In fact, he went to University of Tennessee for a year. He didn't like the university tennis there, and because he was used to in Spain 6-7 hours of tennis every day, and he didn't like weekend tennis there. So he went back to Germany. So he has been in Germany for the last 5-6 years. Why is it that nobody has thought about creating really something like your bat? That was, unfortunately for him, you had shut down bat when he came into the tennis. So even now it is not too late, Vijay. Something must be done in Chennai to create an academy of the sort that you are thinking about. And then there are people, there are parents willing to pay. We were willing to pay. Yeah. But we just could not get a place where he could go in.
Yeah, no, I think all relevant. Everything is completely relevant. And as I said earlier on, the risk factor, is high to be able to get into something like this. But I always suggest to people who have a child in sport, in any sport, your son Prajnesh is in tennis, whichever sport it might be. The greatest way to get into a college of your choice anywhere in the world is through a sport.
He got 4 universities.
Thank you.
100% sponsor.
Answers my question. But we don't want to take those chances here because there are very few, maybe a handful. There are very few families like yours who would be able to take that risk, to be able to want to do it. When my son, when Prakash was playing, he was playing in Southern California, and arguably the toughest market in the world. And he, under 8s, under 10s, under 12s, under 14s, he was doing nothing. And I was the one coaching him. And all his friends were ranked in the top 10 in Southern California, and Prakash was not ranked in the top 100. And my wife kept saying, you know, what's the problem here? You know, you're playing with him constantly, you're working with him constantly, he's not moving up the ranking ladder. I said, no, but I think he's getting better. Finally, 8s, 10s, 12s, 14s, 16s, he didn't win anything. And my wife finally said, I think you should get him a good coach. So, but I felt that he was in fact getting better. To cut to the chase, he was in 10th standard in Harvard High School in Los Angeles, which is a very good school. And I went to the dean to ask him if I can take my son for 7 weeks to Asia to play tennis, to get experience. And he would come back and do his exams, but not complete his homework. Anyway, I couldn't sell it to him, but I still took him for the 7 weeks. He came back. He was studying till 3 o'clock in the morning and trying to play tennis at 5:30 before going to school. And neither one of them was benefiting. So eventually, I took the plunge of taking him out of school to complete homeschool in grades 10 and 11, which you can do in the US, and see if a college would take him. Because I felt his tennis was getting better. And then he went and won the under-18 championships to become the #1 American junior and got 52 scholarships 72 hours later from Dartmouth to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and all the way to Stanford and USC. My point is that if a family can take a little bit of a risk on a sport, you will in fact be able to get to play college tennis at the highest level, to get better. Some they went to a university in the US. We've got a lot of other kids who also gotten good schools to get into. Now, if you don't want to pursue it thereafter, that's fine as well, but it comes to your choice. But the sacrifices that you all have been through, and will continue to go through, as we work very hard to fulfill his potential, is huge. It's huge. But because we don't have a system that can actually support what Prajnesh does. And that's an important factor for us in any sport, across the board. And we don't have it across the board because it's not run as a business. We have to run it as a business for us to be able to survive. And so I think there are enough sponsors at this point. All the sponsors come to you when you don't need them. You know, I always told my agents, if I was ranked 10 in the world, I don't need an agent. The reason I have you is because you're ranked lower, so you're able to get sponsors for him on exhibitions for him. If I'm like Federer doesn't need an agent. Everything is going to come to him. So there are a lot of these things that need to be addressed. But in our country, from the time we played to what it is today, we have in fact made giant strides because people do believe that you can in fact make a living through sport, which the philosophy and the mentality wasn't there when we played, because that constant question was asked, yes, you play tennis, what do you do for a living? But today you can actually say, I play tennis for a living, I play cricket for a living, I'm going to go out and do this, I play badminton for a living. So the philosophy has changed a little bit, but we still have a very, very high risk factor as far as India is concerned. Anyone else? No.
Hi, sir. So you have been an inspiration to all the youngsters. My question is, for someone who starts playing tennis today, they have people like you, Sania Mirza, or Leander Pace to look up to and say that, yes, we can beat the best in the world. At the time when you were playing, there were barely people from India who were like playing at the international level. At what time did you think, or at what time did you realize that you can be the best in the world and you can beat the best players in the world?
Excellent question. There were 3 matches in my entire career that made a difference to my life. And and continued to instill more belief in myself that I could be better than I could possibly be. The first one happened when I was 13 and a half years old. And I was in high school at Don Bosco, and I was allowed to play the largest college tournament in southern India at Jain College in Tambaram. At Jain College, which I'm sure you know about. It was a huge college event, and they were all college players, 18, 19, 20 years old, and they allowed me to play in it because they felt I was a good enough junior. And I ended up getting to the finals, playing against a 19-year-old medical student from Madras Medical College. And he won the first set 6-4, he won the second set 7-5. He had 9-8, 30-15 in the third. And I won the third set 11-9. I got cramps in my fingers and my stomach. It was in May in Chennai, best of 5 sets. And I had not reached my 14th birthday yet. And so we went behind the screens for a 5-minute break, changed my shirt. My mother gave me dosas at the back of the screen. And she said, no, let's go home. You've done very well. I'm very worried about you. I said, no, Ma, I think I can pull this out. And I went back on the court. My stomach muscle had come out, and I had blisters on my fingers, and ended up winning 6-4 in the fifth. Then there was a little, very, very, very ugly picture of me in the paper the next day. And that was my first match that made a difference to me. The second one was when I was 18, and I had cut my right finger opening a vitamin bottle, and I ended up having 4 stitches on it 6 weeks before the national championships in Calcutta. And we were going to pull out. I had a huge bandage over this finger, and ended up practicing against the wall for a while, and then started hitting the ball a couple of weeks before, and then we all went by train to Calcutta for the national championships. I was 18, and I played the semi-finals against India's number 2 at that time, Jaideep Mukherjee. He had 5-3, 30-15 in the fifth set, and I ended up winning 7-5. Came back 1 hour later to play the double semi-final against India's number 2 team, won the double semi-final 6-4 in the fifth. So that was 10 sets that day on Saturday. And then came back the next day to play the singles final against the great Ramanathan Krishnan. Beat him in 4 sets to win the singles final. And then came back an hour later to beat the number 1 Indian doubles team 7-5 in the fifth. So I played 19 sets in 2 days in the Calcutta heat of May to win the national championships for the first time. So that was my second match. That put me on the Asian stage. And then a year later, I beat Lever at the US Open. So those 3 matches gave me great belief in myself that when you're playing well, when things are going well, is not the time you figure out who you are. It's exactly when things are going completely the wrong way and topsy-turvy. And the great thing about our sport is it tells you clearly that it's going the wrong way. I'll give you one quick example because I think it means a lot to me and to the sporting world and certainly to the business world. India was playing Argentina in the Davis Cup in Delhi, in the summer in Delhi. And I was at the end of my career, and Ramesh Krishnan was our best player. He was ranked 48 in the world at the time. And we were playing Argentina. In Argentina, their number 1 player was ranked 7 in the world, and the number 2 player was ranked 16. And the doubles team was ranked 3 in the world. So we went to Delhi. I was playing captain. Opening match, Ramesh played their number 1 guy, lost in 5 sets. I came back. I beat that guy who was ranked 16 in the world in a very, very tight 4-set match. It lasted for 4 hours. And I was 35 years old. I came back the next day to play doubles against the doubles team, and we lost 8-6 in the fifth. So we played another 4.5 hours. And the guy I was to play in the first day on the first match on the third day had the day off. He was 21 years of age, ranked 7 in the world, much better than me, and I had played 8 hours of tennis over 2 days, And I played him in the first match to keep India alive for the final day. He won the first set 6-3, he won the second set 6-3, he led 3-love, 40-love in the third. I ended up squeezing out the third set, 8-6. We went inside the locker room, put me on the training table, the whole team was around me, and I had lost about 11 pounds in weight. And the doctors looked at me and finally said, listen, I don't think we can let you go out to complete this match because of health. And it's not safe for you to go out and do this. And my manager told the captain, the team manager said, listen, we're very proud of you. You've done India proud. Let's go home. You know, we've done all we could. That's the point in time when you realize in life that there are two roads to take. In any walk of life, whether it's in a family squabble, whether it's a relationship with your kids, whether it's a relationship with your parents, whether it's a relationship within a company, whatever else it might be, it gives you those two roads to take, you know. One where you can remain with the status quo and say, okay, I was good. Or you take this incredible opportunity to prove that you could be great, not to anyone else, but to yourself, in anything that you do. So I said, make sure the ambulance is close by, and the oxygen tank is courtside, which is what we did. And I ended up winning 6-2 in the fifth. And then that put us in the Davis Cup final that year in '87. So I think we're all tested on a daily basis. You know, it's just some things are a little bit more public than others. And for me, the analogy in our sport is so clear. It gives me clarity to do things and the clarity to deal with my kids. It gives me clarity to deal with my wife. It gives me clarity to deal with my parents. It gives me clarity on a lot of things, because the analogy for sport is very clear, especially in our sport. You win, you win, you win. We can do whatever we want from the outside. You know, he's got to do it on his own when he gets in there. You know, you can have tons of people in the stadium, like even Goran Ivanisevic when he was playing. He had trainer, dietitians, coach, massage therapist, so on, so even a priest. They're looking for divine intervention. And he got it in 2001 when he won Wimbledon, beating Pat Rafter in the final on a People's Monday. So I think, you know, you look at these things, and what is great about us, unlike a team sport, which is a different kind of a way to get people together and so on and so forth, if one person goes out, if the great Tendulkar went out for a 1 or a 5 or a 8, you know, there are 4 other people who can kind of save the team. Here, that's not the case. If Federer has a bad day, he's going to have a bad day. So I think always, always, always strive to do the impossible.
Vijay, will end on maybe one last question from me. On a lighter vein, I think you had one situation where you did play a sportsman, a statesman, and strategic tactician. In your Davis Cup against Australia, was it, when they were favored to win, and you told me that story in that car? You know, when you like set up that whole media blitz and stuff.
Oh, right. This was interesting because in '87, when we beat the Soviet Union in the qualifying match, then we beat Argentina in this match I just mentioned to you. Israel was the quarterfinal match, and then we went into the semi-final against Australia in Sydney. And they were so much better than us. They had Pat Cash had won Wimbledon in '87, and Cash and Fitzgerald and Garrett had won the doubles at Wimbledon. And they were so much better than us. We had nobody. We had Ramesh Krishnan ranked in 48, and I was too old and hardly ranked. I was quitting the game. But I said, there's got to be some way that we can trouble these guys, you know. So what I did was I invited Ramesh to come to my home in Los Angeles, and we practiced 7 hours a day. All we did was practice. And we had a coach with us, and we practiced all day long. And every day I did an interview with the Australian press from LA. And I told Australia that we have no chance. India has no chance in this match. We are coming there for a good time. Sydney is a spectacular city. We have tickets to go to the opera at the Opera House. There's an Indian restaurant close to the Regent Hotel. I am so excited to come to Sydney after such a long time to visit my friends. Now that every day, Melbourne Age, Sydney Morning Herald, we just kept on doing and wound them up and wound them up and wound them up. And I told Ramesh and Anand and Sashi, I said, don't talk to the press. I'll do every single aspect of the press. At that time, earlier in the year, this movie came out called Crocodile Dundee. I don't know if you remember this movie. This guy had this, Paul Hogan had this hat for Crocodile Dundee. So I had played in one of the TV shows I had done that year. I had this hat from Crocodile Dundee. So I wore it down to Sydney. When I went down to Sydney Airport, I was wearing the hat. Airport press conference, I told the press, we have no chance. This is a spectacular city. Sydney is such a wonderful, we are looking forward to our entire week here. So they put us in a hotel that was near King's Cross. We didn't want to stay there. We stayed in Sydney Regent, all of us together. And every day I did the same thing with the press. And I knew it was finally getting to the Australians because the Australian team were the only ones who thought that we could trouble them. The rest of the country believed that we were going to be whitewashed 5-love. So that Thursday morning I did an interview with Good Morning Australia, and where the host and hostess said to me, they played my clip from Octopussy and they did a whole thing. And finally they said, Vijay, you come down to Aussie. I know you're not going to be able to win this, but I hope you'll have a good time. This is the interview with this guy on Good Morning Australia, who tells the opposing team that you have no chance. But I had gotten to them completely. Of course, the first day we went up 2-love. I won my match, Ramesh won his match, just because they were so tight. They were so tight, and then, of course, Pat Cash with the racket hit a photographer over the head. And I told Ramesh and the boys, I think we got where we wanted to get to, We got to exactly where we wanted to get to. And we got down to the 5th match. We won 3-2 against Australia in Sydney. First time they'd ever lost in 50 years. And that's the only place I think I stayed one extra day to make sure I could rub it in. But before Rajiv gets up there, may I just say that, first of all, such a great thank you, Rajiv, to you and all of CIC for inviting me to come and just share some stories with you and interact with all of you. This town and this city has given me everything. And wherever I go, wherever I live, whatever I do, I will always be a Chennaiite. Everybody knows that. But more important of all, I just want to be able to see all of us helping one another to be able to put Chennai more on the world map. So thank you all, and God bless all of you.
Vijay, thank you very, very much. Every time I hear you, I get goosebumps. And I'd love to hear more of you and hear more of the stories. So look forward to seeing you here in Chennai and being at CIC as well. Thank you very, very much for taking the time. Of course, I had Vivek, who's his tennis partner, to help me convince Vijay, but it didn't really take too much when we said Chennai and Chennai International Center. So Vijay is such a patriot and such a Chennai. Thank you very, very much for being here and taking the time for being with us. Vivek, I can't say much, and I can't, I really can say that thank you very, very much for doing this, taking the effort. Vivek is a really good friend who would not say no to us, so we took the opportunity to convince him and arm twist him to do this. Thank you very much, Vivek. And thank you all for being here this evening. Have a good evening.